The story begins as a boy named Shiro lives a normal life, but there's a part of him that wishes for something different. As he turns on the TV, he's suddenly transported to a mysterious place, where he meets a man named Seinen, who reveals that he's the person responsible for overseeing the solar system. Shiro thinks he's an alien, but he mentions he's closer to a god, and he shows Shiro the planet Medius, saying that no matter what he does, its civilization keeps collapsing. He notes that he sometimes drops a bead on a planet, which turns into a wave and causes change, and he tells Shiro that he will be the bead that will transform Medius. He reveals that Shiro has already passed away, so if he doesn't go to Medius, his soul will eventually fade away, which shocks him. Seinen tells him that he won't just drop him empty-handed, saying he will give him any special ability that he wishes for. He gives Shiro the ability to use magic, and Seinen asks him if he needs anything else, so he asks for a cute partner, and Seinen tells him to be patient, because he will eventually meet them. He also boosts Shiro's scouting skills, because the materials in the world can be sold for a lot of money, and Seinen also provides him with a handy bag to store everything he collects. Shiro's body starts to fade away, so Seinen quickly assigns him the rest of his abilities, but he thinks he may have given him too much. Shiro wakes up in Medius, and he decides to find other people first. He sees a settlement in the distance, but thinks that if he goes there empty-handed, he won't even get a meal. He remembers Seinen gave him a boost to his scouting magic, so he tries to activate it, but it doesn't work. He wonders if he's saying the wrong thing, so he tries different words, and he manages to find the right command that shows him where all the materials are. He collects everything around him, but he's disappointed because all of the materials are low-ranked. He finds a rock that he likes, and he thinks it must be something rare, but he's shocked to see that even though it's poop, it's still highly rated. A man named Marlowe is sitting outside the village, and he's surprised by how tall Shiro is, so he thinks Shiro must be a warrior, but he mentions he's just there to sell the materials he's collected. Marlowe mentions they don't have a specific shop that can buy everything from him, but he points him to the general store, and as he enters the village, he gets embarrassed because everyone is staring at him. He reaches the store, where an old man named Jerome asks him what he's there for, since he's never seen Shiro before. He shows Jerome the poop he found, which amazes him, and he offers 5 silver coins for it, but Shiro has no idea what it's worth. He asks Jerome the cost of a night at the inn, and he mentions it's 500 rave, where 1 silver is worth 1,000 rave, so Shiro is shocked by how much the poop was worth. He tells Shiro to show him everything he's got, and seeing the amount of stuff he has, makes him wonder what Shiro is doing in their small village, so he mentions that he's just traveling. He offers Shiro a job, telling him to gather Misralore from the eastern mountain. Jerome offers 360,000 rave for all the materials that Shiro has, but he can't believe the amount of money he's getting just for a day's work, and Jerome tells him to be careful when he goes to the mountain, because monsters might appear. At night, as Shiro lies down in his room, one of the inn's staff members named Ellie brings hot water for him, saying it will cost him 30 rave per use. He doesn't understand what he's supposed to do with it, so she tells him to wash his body, but he asks her if there's anywhere he can take a bath, and she reveals that only nobles have such facilities, which surprises him. She notes that a few mages can clean their bodies with magic, but even though they don't have any such people, he gets excited and pays her the money. After she leaves, he cleans his body using magic, and even though he's amazed by how convenient it is, he still feels unsatisfied since he prefers taking a bath. The next day, as Shiro goes to collect more materials, he runs into a corpse which scares him and he falls to the ground. As he looks around the body, he finds a letter from their sister telling him to stay safe, which makes him feel bad, so he makes a grave before leaving. After that, he makes a barrier to protect himself from danger. After setting it up, he starts cooking, and as he takes a bite, he's surprised by how good it tastes. Shiro goes to the Forest of White Trees, also known as the Forest of the Ancient Dragon, where monsters can attack him at any moment. He lights up the forest with his magic, and he scans his surroundings, but he doesn't see any Misralores. He's confused because there aren't any monsters or living things there, which makes him wonder if it's because he smells bad, but he doesn't care as long as he can do his job without any trouble. He runs out of the forest and falls down a cliff, but he manages to chant a command that makes him fly and allows him to land safely on the ground. He sees there are a lot of ores around him, but he still doesn't manage to find a single Misralore. He notices an ore reading, but he feels the ground shaking from an earthquake, so he knows he needs to get the job done quickly. He shoots a fireball at a rock and blows it up, and he's glad to finally have found the Misralore, but he decides to keep going in. He ends up finding a lake, and as he scans the water, he's shocked to see it's SS ranked. He realizes it's because the water has been imbued with the ancient dragon's mana, which means it must have lived there a long time ago, but the dragon Voldias suddenly wakes up and emerges out of the water. Shiro apologizes for trespassing in its home, and is surprised that he can withstand its pressure. He introduces himself, which surprises Voldias that Shiro is a human, because he can sense an overwhelming magic power from him. He notes that Shiro's power is just as strong as his own, so he asks for his help in reviving his child, and Voldias offers to give him Misralore for his help. Shiro wonders where the egg is, and as he brings it out of the water, he's surprised by how big it is. He has no idea what to do with it, so Voldias tells him to pour his magic into it, and he thinks he should heat it up since it's an egg, but it starts sucking all of his magical energy, while Voldias just stands by and laughs. As Shiro passes out, he sees a boy who notes that a normal person usually would run away after seeing a dragon, but Shiro is already changing the laws. He mentions he's been tinkering with the world for hundreds of thousands of years, and he's annoyed by how quickly Shiro has made a change, so he decides to thin out the blessings he received. As Shiro wakes up, he sees the egg has hatched, and a little dragon jumps towards him. Voldias notes that it already has a real name, but he tells him to give it an alias, so he names her Bee. Voldias tells her to roam the world as much as she likes, and Shiro wonders how Voldias can trust his child to someone he just met, but he notes that it's because Shiro is stronger than him. As Voldias goes back into the water, he hits Shiro's bag with magic, but before they go out to the world, he cleans Bee since she smells. As they get out of the cave, Bee is excited and starts flying around since she has never seen the outside, but Shiro knows it's dangerous to travel through the forest at night, so he decides to make a camp. He takes out a glass of water from his bag for Bee, and he realizes Voldias used magic to link his bag with the lake, so Bee can drink as much mana water as she needs to grow. He gives Bee a second glass of water, but she tells him to drink it instead. After that, Shiro makes a barrier using magic stones, and he knows they're supposed to be precious items, but he can make them easily. He cooks a meal for himself, but he sees Bee drooling, so he gives her a bowl as well. As Bee tries to eat the dish, it ends up burning its tongue, so Shiro notes that he told it to be careful. Bee once again eats after it cools down, and Shiro is glad she likes it, because it would have been boring if his partner only drank water as a meal, so he's glad that they both can eat the same things. He asks Bee if it's okay being away from her parents, but Bee just hugs him, and he realizes it's saying that it will be fine as long as she's with him. He's surprised that even a kid like Bee is ranked highly, but he knows that children still need guidance, so he tells Bee to never do anything reckless even if it gets stronger than him. As he keeps giving Bee a lecture, she ends up falling asleep, and he remembers how he asked for a cute partner, but he didn't think he was going to end up with a dragon. The next day, as they reach the forest, Shiro is surprised because it's completely the opposite to the last time he was there. He starts searching for C-ranked materials, and he tells Bee to stay close to him, but she comes flying back after seeing something. Shiro realizes they're surrounded by monsters, but he doesn't mind it because he thinks he might find a few valuable materials after defeating them. A flying monster appears above them, which scares Bee, but Shiro thinks it's nothing compared to Voldias, so instead of feeling scared, he starts drooling thinking about eating its meat. He makes a shield around him and shoots ice at the monster, which impales its body, making it fall to the ground. Bee warns him about the other 6 monsters that are about to attack him, so he increases his speed and makes his body light using magic. He jumps into the air and kicks one of them, and he continues beating them up until they're all defeated. He starts collecting the meat, but he notices that there are even more monsters waiting for them up ahead, which annoys him, because he needs to keep fighting them until they get out of the forest. Bee grabs him and tries to fly away, but he's too heavy, so he makes his body lighter using magic. Bee flies them up into the air, but he suddenly lets him go, which makes him come smashing down. He's glad to be alive, and he realizes Bee carried them to where they were camping. He tells Bee to take it easy on him since he's only a human, and he mentions he will keep depending on her in the future, which makes her happy and she tries to hug him, but he ends up getting hurt once again. After that, as they're walking through the forest, Shiro notices that Bee is interested in the stick he's holding, so he mentions it belongs to a famous tree. Bee breathes on the stick, and since her breath is filled with mana, it makes the stick grow. He wonders if it's normal for a material gatherer to use such a staff, because he doesn't want to look like a flashy mage. Shiro suddenly hears something, and he tells Bee to be careful because it might be a monster. Bee goes to check it out, so Shiro runs after her to make sure she doesn't get hurt, but he sees Bee flying around a tree. As he goes toward it, he finds an injured elf, and he wonders if she was attacked by a monster, but after hearing the rumbling from her stomach, he realizes she's just hungry. She asks for water, so he gives her his bottle, and after she finishes all of it, she seems fully revived. He sees that she's still feeling hungry, so he offers her the lunch that he packed, and she quickly starts eating it. She's shocked by how good it tastes, and she thinks she's ascending to heaven from the flavor, but he mentions that anything would have tasted amazing to her since she was starving. He doesn't understand why she didn't pack any food, even though she isn't that far away from the village, and he tells her that she smells, which makes her annoyed, so she mentions it's because she's been camping for 3 days. As she's about to leave, she thanks him for saving her, but she's still annoyed that he called her smelly. After that, Shiro keeps gathering materials, and as they get out of the forest, Bee notices a carriage coming toward them, and Shiro is impressed that she can see that far away. The man on the carriage named Porin asks Shiro if he's a mage since he's holding a staff, but he mentions that he just collects and trades materials, which surprises him because it's rare to find a gathering specialist. He offers to give Shiro a ride, and he tries to refuse his offer since he's too big for the carriage, but Porin's children start laughing at him for how big he is. Porin doesn't mind it and tells him to get in, but as the little girl asks him to sit with her, he doesn't understand why children have started to like him ever since he came to the world. He apologizes for taking too much space, but they don't mind it, because it's a rule in their village to help each other when in need. He asks them what they would have done if he were a bandit, but they know it isn't true, because if he were a dangerous person, their magic item would have gone off. They notice something in Shiro's clothes, and they tell him to show them what he's hiding, but he's hesitant to reveal Bee since she's a monster, but they mention it's normal for adventurers to have monsters with them. So he tells Bee to come out, and the kids find her extremely cute, while their parents wonder if he's a dragon knight since he's carrying a dragon. He notes that he found a dragon egg, which surprises them even more because they didn't think it was possible to hatch them. At night, as they decide to set up camp, Shiro puts down magic stones to keep the monsters away, and he notes that if something does get close, Bee will alert them, which makes them relaxed. He offers to cook dinner as a thanks for their help, and as he takes out the ingredients, they think he's a mage, but he mentions that his bag is just a magic item. After he prepares dinner, everyone can't believe how good it tastes, but Shiro notices something is wrong with Porin, so he asks him if he didn't like the food, but he's crying because of how delicious it was, which makes Shiro laugh. As he enjoys the night with everyone, he thinks about how when he was on Earth, he never realized how fun it was to have dinner with everyone instead of eating by himself. The next day, Porin's wife Eliza asks Shiro what he's doing, and he mentions he's just cleaning his scissors, so she notes that people who take care of their tools always do good work. As they're about to leave, Shiro asks for Porin's permission to drive the carriage, and he's surprised since Shiro immediately makes the unicorn like him. They reach the village, and as they say goodbye, Shiro thanks them for giving him a ride. He asks Marla what Porin does for a living, so he notes that during winter, Porin goes to the warmer regions to do weaving, and when he returns, it means spring has arrived. He mentions Porin always has a hard time with food since there's no hunting, which makes Shiro realize why he started crying after eating his cooking. After that, Shiro shows Jerome all the things he gathered, and he thinks about how in addition to everything Jerome asked for, he also added a Mizro magic ore. He wonders how Jerome will react to it, and after staring at it for a while, Jerome asks him where he found it, because it's a legendary item. He notes that a few Mizro magic ores could replace all the magic stones used in the kingdom, which shocks Shiro, because he didn't think it was that valuable. He mentions that he stumbled across it by accident, but Jerome thinks that even if it fell at his feet, the fact that he picked it up means he has both luck and skill. Jerome tells him he lacks common sense, so he should go to a city called Belkame, which is much bigger compared to the village, where he will be able to get information, and he will also learn how the world works. He tells Shiro he can't buy the magic ore since it's too valuable, but there will be shops in Belkane that can handle it. He doesn't want Shiro to leave, but he thinks that if he makes a name for himself, it will also make their village famous, and it means that his shop will prosper as well. At night, Shiro reads about what a guild is, and how adventurers have different roles, so he decides to join a guild in Belkane, because his goal has always been to see the world, which means if he becomes an adventurer, he will be able to do it while making money. He decides to stay at the village for a few days, and he wonders what he can do with the magic ore since Jerome didn't buy it. He wants to help the village, and he gets an idea, so he uses the ore to upgrade a lantern into a magic item, and he's glad to see his idea working out. For the next few days, Shiro goes around the village enjoying his time, and he gives a monster he hunted to a woman, who turns it into soup seasoning for him. She's sad that he won't be with them soon, and she tells him that all the villagers want him to stay for a little longer, but he can't waste any more time since there's a lot more he needs to see. She knows she can't stop him, so she gives him a bunch of stuff, since it will take him a month to reach Belkane, and he's glad he has his item box to store everything. The next day, the whole village comes to see him off, and Porin cries seeing him leave. He gives the magic item he made to Marlowe, telling him it will cast a barrier around the village, and it won't allow anyone with harmful intentions to enter. Marlowe wonders if he's sure that they can have such a valuable item, so he mentions that it's his way of thanking them for everything they have done for him, and he wishes for them to be safe because he considers the village his home. Jerome inspects the magic item, and he's shocked to see the magic ore powering it, so Shiro quickly runs away before they give it back to him. As they start their journey, they run into a huge crab, but Shiro gets excited after seeing that it's edible. He hardens his body and prepares to fight it, but B lets out a scream and knocks it out. Two more crabs appear in front of them, and Shiro thinks they can only walk sideways, but he's shocked when they rush straight toward him. B picks him up to dodge the monsters, which makes them run into each other, and they both get knocked out, but as one of them gets up, he sends it flying with the staff. At night, he cooks the crabs, and as they take a bite, they both find it delicious. They finally reach Belkane, where Shiro notices there's an inspection before entering, so he disguises his item bag to look normal, and he tells B to hide as well. The guards check his belongings, and they ask him if he's there to sell materials, but he mentions that he's interested in joining the guild. They use magic items to make sure he isn't dangerous, so he wonders what they see when they check his status, and he realizes that all the blessings he received are hidden. They find nothing suspicious about him, but they ask him about his blessing of the dragon gift, so he tells B to come out. They're distracted by how cute she is, and one of them tells Shiro to put a tag on her that proves she belongs to him, so he puts a charm that the kids from the village gave him on B's tail, and they note that they will send a letter to the mayor, informing him a dragon has entered the city, so that he doesn't get into trouble. They enter the city, and they're immediately amazed by it, making Shiro feel like he reached a new world once again. They go to the Adventurers Guild, where the receptionist Ariana greets him. She notes that new people are encouraged to join the guild, so she gives him a form to fill, but he thinks about how even though he instinctively knew their language, he has no clue how to write. He simply fills out the form in Japanese, but it automatically gets transformed into the language of the world, and even though he doesn't know the skill that made it happen, he's just glad seeing how convenient it is. She asks him if he has any combat experience, so he tells her about all the monsters he's fought, but she needs to see proof to make sure he isn't lying. He notes that he has something with him, but it's pretty big, so he asks her if it's okay to take it out, and she gives him the permission. He opens his item box and takes out one of the huge crabs he defeated, but as he puts it on the table, it breaks into pieces. It attracts the attention of all the adventurers, and they wonder what happened, while he asks her if it's enough to prove he really defeated the monsters. One of them realizes he has an item box, and Shiro notes that it was given to him as a gift, so the man uses a skill on him and tells Ariana she shouldn't be scared because he's telling the truth. Shiro doesn't understand what he did, so he mentions he has a skill that lets him see if a person is dangerous, and since it showed a blue aura around him, it means he has no bad intentions. He notes that they should move on to appraise the crab and pay Shiro, so Ariana tells him he's there to register with the guild, which surprises him, because he thought Shiro's goal was to sell the crab, but he mentions it's just something he eats. He asks Shiro if he has any party members, so he points them to B, which surprises everyone, and they all start getting close to him to get a better look at her. After that, Ariana finishes registering Shiro to the guild, and she tells them that all new adventurers start at the lowest rank F. She gives him a bracelet, and as he puts it on his arm, he's happy that it matches with the charm that he gave to B. Shiro speaks with the family of the body that he found in the woods, and they blame their son Bell for being reckless, and we learn he was trying to make money for his sick father. After that, we see Shiro selling his materials to the guild, and we learn that it's been a month since he arrived in Belkame. He seems to have gotten popular for the kinds of materials that he can find, and Ariana brings him a list of all the people who want to hire him, but he thinks there are too many. We see Shiro taking a bath, and we see that he purified it with his magic when he first arrived, and he's glad that he can relax there. He's joined by a lizard man named Clay, and he mentions hearing about how Shiro can use healing magic, and he didn't even charge a fee, so he thinks Shiro is a good guy. Shiro worries that other healers will get mad at him since he did it for free, but Clay just laughs at him and thinks he's bound to attract attention. Back at the guild, the official Grit suggests for Shiro to level up his rank so he can take on harder jobs, but Shiro is happy staying at F rank so he can keep things easy, thinking that he just wants a peaceful life, but there's suddenly a warning about a goblin attack. The adventurers immediately prepare their defense, calling on everyone ranked D and above, so Shiro thinks it doesn't concern him, but he gets stopped and ends up being dragged along. The guildmaster tells everyone about the plan to hold the goblins off at the bridge, and some of the adventurers tell Shiro not to get in their way, but the guildmaster approaches him, mentioning how Grit has been praising him, and he's impressed that Shiro isn't intimidated by him, but Shiro isn't keen on the attention. The guildmaster leaves the rest to his assistant Musically, and she hopes that they can meet his expectations, but we see that when they get outside, she's immediately terrified. Shiro tries to calm her down, telling her it's natural to be scared in a fight, but they're just there as healers. He manages to inspire her, and Clay suddenly appears, laughing at his speech that was out of character from his usual self. Shiro wonders why he isn't on the front lines, so Clay mentions how his old wounds are hurting. He gets sensitive about the topic, wondering if Shiro thinks he got the scar on his back from running away, but he reveals it was from protecting someone. They hear a horn in the distance, and they realize the main formation was breached, so the enemy will be headed their way. Clay rushes out to fight, and Musically keeps her composure in front of the others. Shiro realizes he can't avoid the trouble, so he takes out his staff and puts up a barrier around them, and he goes to follow after Clay. We see the adventurers fighting the goblins, and some of them get past, but Shiro comes running, using his hardening magic on his body, and he sends one flying. B takes the rest out using a thunderbolt, and the adventurers thank them for their help. Shiro wonders how they were pushed back so far, so they mention how a goblin sergeant appeared, causing the front line to collapse. It starts to rain, and we see Clay fighting on his own, but his old wound hurts, and he's about to get jumped, but Shiro arrives just in time. He reminds Clay how his old wound acts up when it rains, so he thinks they should retreat, but the goblin sergeant appears, and they realize they need to fight. More goblins appear, and Clay is ready to sacrifice himself, but Shiro asks him if his wound has a special meaning to him. He mentions that he hates it, because it's a reminder of his foolishness, so Shiro offers to completely heal it for him. B takes out some of the goblins with her thunderbolt, and Shiro uses the chance to throw Voldia's water on Clay and cast his healing magic. The wound on his back disappears, but he also ends up transforming, and he feels power flowing through his body, telling Shiro that he will handle the rest. After that, the guildmaster wonders who Shiro really is, but he mentions that he's just a rank F adventurer, so the guildmaster decides not to pry, and tells him he will be rewarded for what he did. We see Clay back to normal, and he wonders what Shiro did to him. He mentions how he used Voldia's water because he thought it would speed up the healing, and Clay is surprised to hear about his encounter with an ancient dragon. Clay also wonders who he is, so he thinks about how he wasn't forbidden from revealing his true identity, but he realizes it will only attract more attention. Clay apologizes and decides not to push him any further, but Shiro decides to trust him and reveals that he's from another world. Clay is completely shocked, so Shiro tries to explain how he was reincarnated after dying, and he still finds it hard to believe, but he notes that Shiro turned him into a dragon newt, which is the noble ancestor of the lizard man, so he has no choice but to believe. He's afraid he will destroy everything using the power, so Shiro tells him not to get too excited, and Clay thinks he's too casual about everything that he does. Shiro asks a blacksmith named Ribble if she sells scissors for gathering materials, so she explains that she doesn't, but notes that her master might be able to help him. She takes him to her master, but he sees blacksmiths along the way, and he thinks they're incredible, so she tells him about her dream to forge a sword fit for a hero. They meet her master Gruses, and she introduces Shiro as the material gatherer everyone's talking about, so Gruses realizes that he's popular. She notes that he could help them get Ildrawar for the sword they'll bring to the exhibition, but Gruses is against her idea, since he thinks it's too dangerous to send him to the Ryuhai mine. So they start to argue, as Gruses reminds her that their ore supply has dropped, because demons are said to live in the mine. He tells her that blacksmiths must value human lives, so they shouldn't put Shiro in danger just to get the ore they need, and she cries hearing this, telling him to forget everything she said. But Shiro heard everything, so he realizes the situation they're in, and he volunteers to look for the ore, under the condition that Gruses rewards him with a pair of scissors. He's shocked that Shiro is willing to risk his life for the ore, but he notes that he can take care of the threat in the mine, and he takes out a giant crab's arm. Gruses knows that it belongs to a monster that even B-rank adventurers struggle to defeat, so he's convinced that Shiro can deal with the threat, and he allows him to take on the mission. After that, we see Shiro in a carriage, and we learn that he needs to travel through a village to reach the Ryuhai mine. He realizes that B wants to eat crab, so he tells her they don't have any, but notes that he's craving the same food. They get off the carriage, and they see a horse trader, so he thinks about traveling on horseback. But he sees the elf he saved arguing with the merchant, since she asked for a white horse, but he gave her a giant raven. So he explains that everyone in the area calls creatures that can haul cargo horses, and he realizes that she's looking for a white Pegasus, so he tells her she might find one in the dwarven kingdom called Vosriel. She decides to go there, and Shiro realizes that they're heading to the same place, but he thinks about gathering materials along the way. He looks around the woods, and realizes that it's filled with edible mushrooms, but he sees flowers that can be used to treat wounds, so he starts gathering them. But he hears a strange sound, and realizes that it's coming from the elf's belly, so he gives her water and food, telling her it's the second time he saved her. But he realizes that she smells terrible again, so he uses his magic to clean her, and it makes her feel amazing. She introduces herself as Brel, and thanks him for saving her twice, but he just tells her to take care of herself and prepares to leave. She notes that elves don't repay kindness with neglect, so she offers to help him out, and B takes a liking to her, so he allows her to tag along until they reach the next town. He continues looking around the woods, and she tells him she found animal poop, but he knows that it's just a rock. She also shows him a poisonous mushroom, and she laughs when he tells her what it is, so he thinks her mental age is the same as B's. She offers to gather firewood since it's getting late, and he tells her they can use his magic stones instead of a campfire. But she tells him it's important to leave traces of a campfire behind, so that the other adventurers will know that the spot is safe for camping, and he realizes that she has a point. So she leaves to gather firewood, but she returns with a log, and he thinks they can't use it for their campfire. But she throws it in the air and cuts it into pieces, telling him they can now use it as firewood. He checks out her knife, and realizes that it's an A-rank weapon, which amazes him since he's never seen one before. That evening, Shiro cooks dinner for everyone, and Brel realizes that it tastes amazing. She wonders if he's headed to Vosriel, so he tells her about his mission, and asks her why she also wants to go there, so she reveals that she wants to find a white Pegasus for her sister. She thinks she owes him for the food, so he tells her to serve as his bodyguard, but she's surprised that it's all he wants from her, and she accepts his offer. But after that, he struggles to go to sleep, since his companions are too loud. The next day, they reach a village, and they eat at a restaurant, where the waitress gives them dwarven food. Shiro mentions that it tastes delicious, and Brel tells him about a lizard man she knows, who bears the title of Honorary Dragon King. He appears behind Shiro, who realizes that she was talking about Clay, and she tells him they haven't met for ages. He isn't happy that Shiro left town without saying a word, and he notes that he informed the guild before he left, but Clay tells him he gave them a vague explanation. Shiro tells him about his mission, so Clay notes that the Ryuhai mine is dangerous, but Shiro thinks the quest is worth it, since Grus has promised to give him scissors as a reward. He thinks Grus will give him other items if he succeeds, and Clay thinks he's being naive, but he explains that scissors are important for gatherers. Clay decides to go with him, revealing that he wants to visit Vosriel to get his spear repaired, and Brel notes that she's traveling with Shiro as his bodyguard. So Clay joins her, and Shiro knows that they're both skilled warriors, but he doesn't feel comfortable being around them. They reach Vosriel, where they see people falling in line at the entrance, but Clay talks to one of the guards, who immediately allows them to enter. Shiro wonders why they're being treated like VIPs, and the guard welcomes them to the Dwarven Kingdom, but he tells Clay that the king wants to meet him. Shiro asks him if he knows the king, so he explains that they have a complicated relationship, but the guard notes that he's the hero who saved the kingdom from the Thunder King. Clay mentions that he didn't do anything heroic, and reveals that the dwarves were once forced to pay tribute to the Demon Lord, but it immediately ran away when it saw him. The guard shows everyone a statue they made for Clay, but he becomes embarrassed, since it looks nothing like him. They meet King Zorwad, but Clay asks him why his statue looks ridiculous, and Brel realizes that they're close. Shiro formally introduces himself, but Zorwad tells him there's no need for formalities, and Shiro gives him a letter from Grus. He reads it, and realizes that Shiro wants to enter the Ryuhai mine, so he warns him about the demons that are said to live there. Clay tells Zorwad not to worry, since he and Brel will protect Shiro, so Zorwad tells them to uncover the truth behind the demons in the mine. The head receptionist of the Adventurers Guild, Zambo, guides them through the tunnels, and they realize it's too dark, so Shiro uses his spell to create a ball of light. He also uses his read spell, and he explains that they won't get lost, since his magic displays their location on the map. He starts looking for the Eldraor, but he sees that the mineral reaction in the area is weak, and everyone senses monsters approaching, so they prepare for battle. They get attacked by giant spiders, so Clay stabs one of them, while Shiro uses his spell to paralyze the other one, and he tells Brel to finish it off. So she slices it in half and starts celebrating, but he thinks she looks gross since she's covered in blood. They continue to look around, and they reach a dead end, but Shiro knows that there's Eldraor inside the walls. So he tells everyone to stand back, while he creates a barrier around his target, and blasts it with his eruption spell. They see crystals everywhere, and Zambo notes that they're Ildrite vein, while Shiro scans them, realizing they're the crystallized form of Eldraor. But he suddenly sees something approaching, and he prepares to take it on, as Zambo mentions that it's the demon everyone's talking about. Shiro tells his companions he'll take care of it, and notes that it's his prey, but we see that it's a giant crab, and he looks forward to eating it. He celebrates with B, but the crab attacks him, and Clay tells him it's an A-rank monster called a Trango crab. He and Brel prepare to fight, but Shiro stops them, and he tells B to cover him, as he activates his buffs and charges in. B uses her sonic attack to stun the crab, while he smashes it with his staff, but it withstands the blow and pushes him back. It tries to crush him, so B uses her skill to freeze its leg, and he scans its body to find its weak spots. He summons ice needles, and she surrounds them with her wind spell, as he mentions that it's time to end the fight. He launches them at the crab's weak spots, and it gets frozen in place, which impresses Zambo and Brel. But Clay wonders why Shiro didn't let his bodyguards interfere, and he realizes that Clay is upset, so he explains that he didn't want to ruin the crab's edible parts with their weapons. Clay realizes that he wants to eat it, but he reminds Shiro that he and Brel are his bodyguards, so he should learn to rely on them during battles. He apologizes for his actions, and they gather the Ildrite veins in the area, but he notes that he's still getting strong readings ahead, so they should be able to find more if they go deeper. Zambo thanks him for taking down the demon and finding the mineral deposit, but Brel tells him they should head back. So they return to Zorwad, and Shiro tells him they were able to defeat the greatest threat in the mine, but Zorwad wants to know if he's telling the truth. So he takes out the crab's remains from his item box, but it creates an earthquake as it hits the ground, and Zorwad is surprised by how huge it is. He praises Shiro for defeating it, and notes that he deserves a reward, but he mentions that he just wants the crab. After that, Brel mentions that they each received 3 million rave, but Shiro is still thinking about eating the crab. The next day, Brel receives a white Pegasus as reward, and she mentions that it looks perfect. The guard gives Clay his spear, and he realizes that it has been repaired, but Brel notes that she needs to go home since the Pegasus is meant for her sister. She mentions that she owes Shiro big time, but he tells her they're already even since he got a crab out of their deal. Clay tells him their carriage has arrived, so they say goodbye to Brel, who tells them they'll meet again before flying away. They return to the Adventurers Guild, where Ariana asks them if they've formed a team, so Shiro tries to explain that it isn't the case, but Clay tells her they've decided to team up. She becomes excited hearing this, and leaves to report to her superior, while Shiro wonders why Clay lied to her. So he explains that he has decided to keep an eye on him, since he has nowhere else to go, and be as happy to have him in the team. Shiro thinks it isn't a bad idea, so he talks to Clay about the name of their team, and they decide to call it the Azure Black Brigade. Shiro returns to Grusa's and shows him the Ildrite vein, asking him if it's the material he needs, but he has no words, so Shiro wonders if something's wrong. But Grusa's and Ribble are overjoyed to see Ildrite, and they start crying, telling Shiro they're glad they hired him. Grusa's notes that he hasn't seen Ildrite in over 100 years, and Shiro knows that its quality is perfect, but he didn't expect them to get emotional upon seeing it. Ribble thinks they can never repay him, since he brought them a lot of Ildrite, but he reminds them that he just needs a pair of scissors, and tells them to win the contest by using the stones he gave them. A few days later, we see Shiro drinking with Clay, when a bear named Wade interrupts them, and tells them they received a summons from someone important. Shiro sees the seal on the letter, and Clay tells him it's the crest of House Luzaliva, which governs the territory. Shiro doesn't want to read it since he thinks he'll get into trouble, so he pretends to be sick, but Clay knows that he's lying, and Wade notes that Lord Luzaliva is a good person. So Shiro opens the letter, and he realizes that it's addressed to him and Clay, telling them to head to the Lord's manor, so that he can reward them for their achievements. Clay is surprised to see his name in the letter, so Wade reveals that the Lord heard about their team, and he decided to summon both of them. Shiro thinks the Lord is hiding his true intentions, and he's worried that the Lord will take B away from him, but Wade explains that he isn't that kind of person. We see Shiro and Clay in a noble's carriage, and Shiro wonders why the people are staring at them. So Clay explains that being summoned by a lord is every adventurer's dream, since a noble can change their lives by backing them up. They arrive at the mansion, where a butler named Raymond greets them, and the maids bow as they enter. But they meet a girl named Tieris, who mentions that she was looking forward to meeting B, and she tells Shiro to hand her over. But he refuses to do it, so she explains that dragons are noble creatures, and he isn't worthy to own one since he's just a commoner. He scans her, and realizes that she's the Lord's only daughter, which explains why she's a spoiled brat, but he wonders how he's supposed to handle her. He kneels before her and asks her why she wants B, so she reveals that it's because Bernard told her to take her away from him and stand firm if he refuses to cooperate. So he realizes that Bernard is the culprit, but he doesn't even know who Bernard is, and he explains that he can't give B to Tieris since she's part of his family. So Tieris feels guilty for trying to take her away from him, and she apologizes for her actions, but B smiles at her, so Tieris thinks she has forgiven her. Shiro wonders why she wants a dragon, so she explains that she wants to show it to her mother, and her father interrupts them, but Shiro wonders why he looks so young. He introduces himself as Belmont, and invites Shiro and Clay for a cup of tea, as he apologizes for his daughter's behavior. Clay wonders why he summoned them, so he reveals that he needs them to help his wife, who has been bedridden for half a year. He mentions that he heard rumors about Shiro's healing powers, and Belmont believes that he can heal a sick person in an instant, so he begs Shiro to save his wife. He explains that Tieris wanted a dragon because she believed that it would help her mother get better, and he admits that she's foolish, but he knows that she has a kind heart. Shiro is worried that he might mess up while trying to heal Belmont's wife, but he knows that he can't offend a lord, since it might get him into trouble. So he agrees to help Belmont, who leads him to his wife Malteria, and tells her he brought the man with healing powers. Shiro wonders if they can brighten up the room, but Belmont explains that she's sensitive to sunlight, and Shiro scans her, realizing she has a lot of illnesses. Belmont asks him if he can cure her, so he explains that he can treat her symptoms, but he doesn't know if he can cure her ivor poisoning condition, since he's never even heard of it. He asks Belmont if he trusts him, reminding him that he's just a random adventurer, and she mentions that she isn't expecting a miracle. But she wants to hold Tieris in her arms again, so Belmont tells him to do whatever it takes to save her. Clay wonders if Shiro will cast the spell he used to heal him, but he explains that Malteria might not survive if he uses it, since it burns through the target's mana. He decides to start with her eyes, since he wants to brighten up the room, so he uses his healing spell to slowly pour mana into her. He tells her to open her eyes, and she realizes that her vision is back to normal, so he uses his magic to clean the room and open the windows. She's overjoyed to see the sun again, and Clay praises Shiro for healing her, but he can sense that something's wrong, so he notes that they should move somewhere else. Belmont takes them to another room, where Shiro reveals that Malteria has been poisoned by Ivor toxin, so he thinks someone in the mansion is trying to kill her. He explains that he can't fully cure her, since he doesn't understand how Ivor poisoning affects the body, and he thinks they need an antidote to save her. Belmont mentions that there's no antidote, since Ivor is a forbidden poison lost to time, but Shiro thinks they can make one if they find the toxin. Clay notes that they don't know where to find it, but Belmont mentions that they might have a lead, and he shows everyone the ancient documents compiled by his ancestors. He notes that he can't understand them since they're written in ancient script, but Shiro can read them thanks to his skill, and he uses his search ability to find the book that mentions Ivor poison. He starts reading it, and everyone realizes that it's a travel journal from an adventurer who found Ivor flower close to a horse-shaped rock by a lake. Clay mentions that he recognizes the spot, and he notes that it's close to a village called Asketh, so Shiro decides to go there. Before they leave, Shiro places a crystal outside the mansion, since he thinks someone might try to harm Malteria while they're gone. Tiaris apologizes for being rude to him, and he admits that her words were unpleasant, but he tells her to be proud since she realized that she was wrong, telling her it will help her grow as a person. He mentions that while he's gone, someone might try to convince her that he's a villain, and he tells her to talk to her father if that happens. He leaves with Clay, and he uses his spell to make them travel faster, but they're surprised by how effective it is. They reach a dry area, and Clay mentions that it used to be a farmland, so Shiro wonders what happened to it. They see the lake nearby, but they wonder why it can't support life, and Shiro scans it, realizing it contains a toxin. The villagers ask them what they're doing there, so Shiro explains that they're adventurers, and notes that they accepted a request to gather rare materials. But the villagers don't trust them, so Clay shows them his armband, which proves that he's an A-rank adventurer. Shiro starts asking them questions, but a boy named Gonza falls to his knees, and Shiro realizes that he's malnourished, so he asks the others what happened to them. They take him to their village, and reveal that 10 months ago, the lake's color suddenly changed, and the fish started dying, so they decided not to drink from it. But a merchant named Ngok offered to help the village if they gave him a golden flower in exchange, and we learn that it's the divine flower passed down in the legends. Its location is a village secret, but they agreed to give Ngok one of them each month, in exchange for 60 barrels of water. But it isn't enough to water the crops, which explains why everyone hasn't been eating well, and Shiro realizes that the divine flower is Ivor. He thinks Ngok is evil, and the villagers don't believe him, since he was so nice to them, so Shiro explains that their lake is poisoned, and he thinks Ngok was behind it. He adds that the Ivor flower is poisonous, which shocks the villagers, and he knows that Ngok is making them suffer, so he's determined to take him down. He orders Bee to use her spirit magic, which causes it to rain, and the villagers are amazed, thinking it's a blessing from the heavens. He takes out his staff and cleans the villagers with his magic, before repairing the entire village, and he mentions that he has food for everyone. After they enjoy their meal, the village chief thanks Shiro for everything he has done for them, but he notes that they can't give him anything in return. Shiro mentions that he wants to harvest Ivor flowers to make an antidote, and the chief agrees to take him to their secret spot, but the children interrupt them and offer to show Shiro around the village. The chief mentions that they haven't repaid him yet, but Clay tells him not to worry, since showing him the Ivor flower is more than enough. Gonza takes Shiro to their secret base, and he reveals that they have fruits stored there, but he notes that they're too salty. Shiro scans one of them and sees fluid coming out of it, so he tastes it and realizes that it's actually soy sauce. Back in the mansion, Tiaris rushes to her mother's room since she can hear Shiro's alarm going off. We learn that he placed a barrier around the room so that everyone will learn when a person with ill intent approaches Malteria, and Tiaris sees the butler Bernard at the door. So she asks him if he wants to hurt her mother, and he notes that he would never do that, but she thinks he's lying since he triggered Shiro's alarm. He tells her not to trust Shiro, since all adventurers are evil, but Tiaris is convinced that he's a good person. Bernard reminds her how he served her family with absolute loyalty, so she should trust him instead of Shiro, but Belmont interrupts them and listens to what they have to say. He notes that Shiro may be trying to deceive them, but Raymond arrives with water, and Belmont tells Bernard to prove his innocence by drinking it. He reveals that it has the medicine that Bernard has been giving Malteria, so he becomes nervous and refuses to drink it. Belmont throws it at his face, and he freaks out since he thinks it's poison, but Belmont drinks it and reveals that it's just water. He orders his guards to arrest Bernard, and Raymond reveals that they found a document in his belongings, which makes Belmont realize that he's working with an organization. We see Ngok in the village, and a villager asks him what he wants, so he reveals that he's there to meet the chief, since he has come to collect the Ivory flower for this month. The villager notes that the chief left with adventurers, but he explains that they can't hand over the flower, since they know that it's poison. So Ngok calls his men, and tells them there's been a change of plans. Meanwhile, the chief leads Shiro through a cave, and when they reach the Ivory flowers, Shiro is amazed by the sight. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.